Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Arindam Banerjee, who is the Executive VP, Managing Director, India and Philippines, Wells Fargo, to deliver the keynote address. Arindam, you are at the center of the stage.
Good day to everybody, and I do hope everyone's in the middle of the NASTech 2021 conference, and it is my pleasure to be actually speaking at this meeting, essentially talking about the adapting, adopting, and evolving for the future of banking. As we speak around this topic, I think one really needs to think through what are the short, medium, and long-term strategies by banks in the face of changing customer expectations. Firstly, customer-facing industries are going through a change where they're evolving away from project-led or platform-led organizations to now customer-led focus. As this customer centricity is adopted in banks through models like customer journey frameworks, it will also mean a shift away from customization of products to hyper-personalization for the customers. This will mean that banks will not only understand what customer wants, but also when the customer wants it, and accordingly nudge the customer at the right time. This is very important to think of it in the context of banks like ours in Wells Fargo, where it is considered to be a multi-generational bank dealing with a lot of customers who come through a different set of generations, and their digital adoption are at various stages of evolving. Now, this is something which obviously has been accelerated through the last couple of years as we've been through this pandemic, but I do believe it's something which is a secular trend at this point, and it is sort of the path forward. The second is the role of innovation as we look at this pivot to a customer-led focus. I think, due to the increased competition from other banks as well as fintechs, the core banking services may well be commoditized, and the key differentiator will actually boil down to innovation, and the competitive advantage will actually get narrower as digital offerings are far more easily replicable, as opposed to the traditional sort of competitive advantage which used to be derived by way of the branch footprint. So competition will increase because digital offerings can be accelerated in terms of competitive peers. I think the best organizations will actually be leveraging the NPS in a much real-time fashion to understand their customers and adapt their offerings almost on a real-time basis to ever-changing sort of demanding customer base, which will come in at different levels of maturity. So I think innovation has to therefore play a key part in this pivot to a customer-led focus in building our offerings. I think the franchises will continue to compete in terms of innovation. The banks will get great by either sort of adapting and building on innovation or co-opting fintechs to serve their customer base. Very few fintechs, in my view, will make the transition to fully fledged regulated institutions. Most will continue to be competing with each other for market share of their customers and the banking links that they actually build in terms of making sure that there's a collaborative ecosystem between fintechs and banks. The future ecosystem, in my view, will not see fintechs taking over banks. Some of it may happen vice versa, but it will likely to be a hybrid ecosystem with the right partnerships will be the sort of long-term game which is going to get played out. As we move into this sort of hybrid banking fintech ecosystem of the future and it matures, uh, it will be a a game which is going to be adapting to open banking structures for two primary reasons. Large financial players still exist, just that the mode of operations are shifting from the physical to the digital world, and the second is customers are likely to be less forgiving in the digital ecosystem. So the adaptability of an organization to an open banking culture will again be an essential part of this collaborative uh, banking fintech ecosystem of the future. So, just concluding on this particular part, I think customer-led focus, innovation being key, uh, the competition environment will become a banking fintech sort of collaborative environment, and adoption of open banking are the four themes which I expect will be the trend for the future. Clearly, the role of the technology organizations, which many of us in the GCCs actually play a critical part to, and I'll come to that and why we are in a position of advantage, but just sort of narrowing down to understanding why the technology organizations supporting both our legacy and emerging technologies for large banks such as ours, in how critical they are is going to be in terms of adapting to these expectations which I just laid out before this. I believe the shift to this customer-led focus is also linked to the fact that there is a smartphone proliferation, there's a mobile first sort of mindset, there is a mindset of 24/7 connectivity and 24/7 availability. And therefore, it is completely transforming our customer behavior as well as their expectations out of our technology organizations or from the banking institution and hence the technology that backs it up, right? The second is the hyper-personalized future that we talked about a little while back, uh, where technology is basically going to have to ensure that distributed computing, cloud computing, open banking, API-based protocols are going to be at the center of how we build and migrate to the technologies of the futures. So therefore, banks will need to invest heavily in their technology modernizations as well as upgrading their data centers. The extent of data which is actually going to be a critical requirement in the future, because that hyper-personalization will also require tremendous amount of analytics and the ability to crunch data to give those optionalities to the customer. These require modern computing technologies, modern sort of cloud adoptions to fall into place. So I believe there will be banking, banks and fintechs in that collaborative system will have to, build and upgrade to compete, right? Because the revenues and margins are going to be thin. And if they have to really compete, they have to be able to sort of cater to this hyper-personalized requirement. So three reasons why technology is important to summarize that. Firstly, the fact that there's the whole mobile first mindset and as a gadget going forward. Second is the availability being 24/7, hyper-personalized futures, and making sure that there is backbone technologies around cloud, open banking, distributed computing, which allows for that data-based approach and to solving a customer's focus. So I do believe that all our technology organizations play a very key role in adapting to the future environment. Coming to the evolution of the GCCs, the Global Capability Centers for Banking and Financial Institutions, for which institutions in India and almost every major bank is a major player in that. How do we basically evolve to cater to this new requirement, right? I do believe we've talked about the GCCs being pretty uniquely placed to add value to the enterprise, as they have this co-located knowledge base of business processes, technologies, product management, and increasingly sort of digitally focused development capabilities. So I do believe if we take advantage of these, there's a huge opportunity for taking our GCCs who are able to, leverage these disparate functions, but they're co-located bodies of knowledge to transform the way a banking institution pivots to this customer-led focus. So that's the one thing which I do believe GCCs have a huge opportunity to really lay it out in terms of how they can actually build that collaborative ecosystem, not just externally, but internally within the banking institution to deliver the outcomes in an efficient way at the speed at which we need it. Secondly, I think as banking goes digital, clearly some of the key trends that you will see being exported, and it's already happening quite widely, from the digital and technology organizations is really to the rest of the organization. And it could be in operations, customer service, it could be in risk, where the adoption of agile as a way of working will move beyond digital and technology organizations. And I think this is something which we're increasingly seeing, and I do believe is a trend of the future. The second is the minimum viable product kind of mindset, which is making sure that all the offerings are deployed first in terms of making sure that we have the ability and scale to be testing first into an environment which is acceptable of that testing mindset. And finally, I think the mindset that we built in the GCCs over many years around continuous improvement, continuous delivery, becomes a way of life, really, and it matures to sort of releasing on demand, right? GCCs and many technology organizations have now moved from maybe quarterly releases to weekly releases to, I think there will be a point we will get to in this evolution of the future of banking where releases will be on demand. And I think, final point I would put out for the GCCs is that global product ownership itself in markets such as India have evolved in many areas to be world leading. And therefore, using and leveraging that ecosystem of knowledge to build up products for other parts of the world becomes a massive advantage going forward. So with that, I will conclude. I hope I've given some level of thinking in terms of how we will adapt and adopt and evolve for the future of banking. And I do believe very strongly that the GCCs are very well placed in this, and not just in their digital organizations and technology organizations, but it will go wider. And we are uniquely positioned for that. So I do hope that this session is laying out in a very short time exactly where we think we're evolving and where the future course of banking is. Thank you very much and wish you all the best.
Thank you, Arindam, for the insights on how the banking industry is shaping up from technology perspective and how it is going to deliver value to the customers.